entrepreneur.
We've raised the bar.
Learn firsthand from successful business owners and create your own path to success.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
It's time to hit the road to growth with team lead of the Enriquez Group, Realtor Vinny.
Hi, you Road to Growth listeners. Today I have Oliver Feakins. He is SEO expert, marketing, anything to do with computer. Is that kind of a correct assessment?
Yeah, anything to do with technology, marketing, SEO, internet marketing. Yeah, absolutely.
That's a lot on your plate, especially I know you've been doing it for a little while. That's a lot of change, a lot of things that probably worked a couple years back compared to what works now. A little bit different, huh?
Yeah. We tend to follow Big Papi Google around. So it's whatever Google's doing, we have to adapt, right? So in the SEO community or the internet marketing space, we're constantly just basically reverse engineering what works in Google and trying to future proof our clients as much as possible. But yeah, completely reactive.
How often are they changing their algorithm? What does it look like? How do you stay up to date with that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of great resources available to the public as well. Moz.com is a company that provides software, but they maintain a really great calendar of updates. And then they also link kind of articles to people's interpretations of those, because Google doesn't really come out and say, we've made up this update. Sometimes they do, but they certainly don't go over kind of what's happening with them, right? So it's up to the SEO community to kind of look as a whole to find out, okay, what's changing, what's not changing, and provide feedback. So as a community, we kind of share this responsibility of documenting these changes and then understanding what's hitting and what's not.
Makes sense. Well, have you always been into computers? I mean, who was Oliver at a young age?
So yeah, I've always been into computers, but more into marketing, right? I really enjoy the study of people. I think human nature is fascinating, and especially when you get into sales and marketing, just the idea of being able to like influence somebody else or, get them to go down a specific thought process, whether it be buying something or, wanting to have the desire to buy something. So you have to kind of be a good steward of people to understand that. I mean, and I'm assuming in real estate and things like that too, it's the same way, right? Like you have a skill of being able to move them through a process. And, when I purchased my last home, right, I had a list of everything that I had to have and everything that it couldn't have. I knew exactly what I wanted. I went to the realtor and he took me to everything that was on my list and we just weren't hitting something. And then he said, you know what, I spent, 3 weeks with you. I have a feeling for what you've been saying, kind of what you're looking at. Can you take a risk with me? And we said, sure. Took me into a house, had nothing on my list, nothing on my everything on my don't show me list, and it was the perfect house, right? So there's a especially in real estate, but also just general in sales and entrepreneurship, like being able to have that sixth sense is really valuable when trying to sell. And I think really being able to develop that skill as a entrepreneur or someone in sales or marketing is really crucial to success. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. What I'm just curious, what was on your don't want list?
So I had so I wanted a specific style of house. I wanted it to be move-in ready. I wanted the dream house, right? No more than this space, no less than that space. And, even to the yard, I wanted it to be, flat. Like I had this vision of what my perfect house was. And we ended up walking into a deal where it was a really large house, like 14,000 square feet. It's a mansion, massive house. But it had been let go for a decade. So it needed a lot of work, but the situation was where the lady that was living it was desperate to get rid of it. It was paid off. Her husband had passed away and she just needed to move. And she's been trying to get out of this house for years. So my realtor's like, look, ignore the footprint, ignore, whatever. This is an opportunity for you to get in and not only have this huge house with a pool and all this stuff, but over time you can make these changes. But really, if you look at this, you're going to stay here for 20 years. This is going to be built in equity once you make these changes. It's a really good investment. It's not what you want, but you're going to be set up really great for the future. And he was right. And we ended up being a money pit, but we're going to make up great on the other end. And we're already appraised at over what we spent on it. So we're already making money, 2 years in, but you couldn't imagine living anywhere else, Yeah,
it's selling that story when people maybe don't want to hear the story. Now you're talking about marketing, kind of telling a story at a young age. So does that mean that you were like selling products, or were you selling your friends on different stuff, or what it look like?
So my dad was an entrepreneur, is an entrepreneur, right? But he was very sales centric. So, and most entrepreneurs, I would say, know how to sell, whether they know it or not, or have some sort of ability to sell, whether it be selling on why you should come work for me, or the vision behind it, or, bringing on customers or resources or getting deals or whatnot. There's something innate to most entrepreneurs. As a young age, I was a DJ. My first job, I was just a mobile DJ, right? Like going to school dances, weddings, all that kind of stuff. And the DJ company went out of business. Not anything I did, but it went out of business. And essentially had like 15 like vans that were like really bad equipment. And they were just like looking to get rid of it, right? So it was like for $2,000, they give you the van, all the speakers and equipment that could fill the van, and a whole set of music, like literally ready to go. Oh, wow. So me and a friend of mine, we both went to our fathers, and we had like wrote up a little business plan. We didn't know what we were doing. We were like 16 years of age, but like we wrote up a business plan of what this thing could make, and we were going to split the $3,000. None of us had any money, so our parents were going to put in $1,500 each, and we would pay them back. And it was a really good experience. Like I went to school till 3, right? And I would get out of school. I'd run to my dad's office. The night before, my favorite thing to DJ was school dances, because it's obviously more fun and chill than weddings. I would literally go online, and I would, back then, 15 years ago, I would get the fax numbers of all the schools' fax numbers, like every middle school. I would literally go on a database and just manually to each website, just literally. And I would make a flyer on like Microsoft Word, and I would sit there at the foot of my dad's desk and manually send hundreds of faxes, to these, that would show up in these offices, attention school dance organizer. And I would get calls. And, I was 16 years old doing, 6 to 8 DJ events by myself, with my friend. I was putting myself through college with it. And I learned a lot about hustle, like I learned a lot that I can either make this happen, or I could sit there and complain why it's not happening. And it chose, to make something happen. So that kind of got me into sales and marketing.
What was your father's perception on his son getting into, I guess, entrepreneurship? I mean, especially with him being an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So my father specifically, so he was interesting. It's interesting. So his motto, I'll never forget this in my life. It's the one piece of advice that he used to say all the time. And it's funny because if you're not in sales, you would think it's not true. But if you are in sales, you definitely agree with it. He used to say, son, nothing happens till you sell something. And it always lived with me, because I think it's really easy to get distracted, right? With this process needs to be absolutely perfect, or this creative needs to be spot on, or this, we got to look at our offices and how cool they are, right? Well, we got to have X, Y, Z, but all of that stuff matters, and it doesn't matter, right? It matters to build your product, but nothing happens till you sell something. So, how many businesses have you seen where their execution to setting up has been fantastic, but their execution to move product or service or to actually sell or get, paper in the bank lacked, right? And in their words, if we build it, they will come. And it's just generally not how it works, right? You have to have attention to that sales process, that marketing process. You have to fuel that demand. And a lot of people don't.
I've talked to a lot of people in the industry, in the real estate industry, and it's so funny. I met some really, really smart people, like smarter than me. You know what I mean? And they're out of the business in a year, 2 years, and it's like they couldn't push it, they couldn't sell their story, they couldn't basically ask for the business, and they might have the greatest systems, but they couldn't get the product, sell the product. So totally agree with you.
And you see it really often in the real estate market, right? Like in my mind, there's like 2 different real estate agents, right? There's the guys, will try to have the fancy website, all the branding, wrap their car, throw the billboards up, sponsor the local football games, with little pillows or whatever. Like, they're trying to create that brand, and that's that interest is going to derive from that in their minds, right? Then you have the guys that maybe do some of that, but really they're hustling, right? So they are, they're going through lists, right? They're calling people that have been on the market for 6 months plus. They're stopping by their house, like, hey, how's it going? You haven't sold yet. Well, look, you got to give me a try. I'm killer. Like, I can get this done. Switch to me, and I'll make sure you get this sold in 90 days, and whatnot. And these guys have that aggression where they're going out and getting business. And generally, in my experience, it's a mix of both. But in my experience, the one that have that hustle mentality tend to do really well. I'll give you a good example on a marketing side of this.
Well, let me jump in really fast.
Yeah.
If anyone's in the real estate field and is listening, if someone's under contract, don't solicit them. Wait till their contract expires. But usually in 6 months, the contract will expire, if not earlier, maybe a little later, and then go after them. But just be aware there can be some legal ramifications. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. You know, I was looking at this. There's an article on the news yesterday or 2 days ago I saw, and maybe you already know this, but there's like a realtor in Los Angeles. I don't know if I necessarily agree with this, but I think it's interesting to say the least. So he does some pretty crazy marketing, right? Crazy marketing, and not say good marketing, but just like legitimately crazy. He had a $1.4 million house in Los Angeles he was trying to sell, and he knew it was competitive and whatnot. So he said, if you bring this house to me, no questions asked, you're going to trust my creative genius, whatever, my marketing, and it's going to be crazy, and you can't say anything. And I said, okay. He's like, great. So here's my pitch. I'm going to photo myself naked all throughout the house, completely naked, in really crazy poses all around the house. And, you know, on the MLS, he obviously did not use it, right? But he did blur everything out. But, you know, on social, on everything, all these pictures of the house are this realtor like in the really like craziest, like barbecuing with nothing but a apron on in the backyard, or sitting spread eagle on the lounge chair outside, or, you know, sleeping in this client's bed completely naked. And, you know, it's obvious, you know, it's sold within 24 hours. He got national exposure. I mean, I guess more ways than one, but national exposure. But it's, you know, it worked for him, and he took a risk. So I got to give him credit for taking that risk. Very unorthodox. You know, but like I said, he did blur everything out. No one's seeing anything. But I mean, I don't know. Take it from what you will.
He took a chance, and he went after, because he probably got a lot of people that are like, oh my gosh, it's disgusting. But then a lot of people are like, yes, I can appreciate that. And like, I mean, that's what you got to do. You got to be you. I mean, I've talked about it before. I mean, just in general, you hear a lot of different people here. They're afraid to be who they truly are, because they feel like they might lose that piece of business. Yet they're going to gain so much more and more dedicated clients.
Yeah, and that's it, right? I mean, he's kind of known for that avant-garde marketing, but it, you know, it tends to work for him. I mean, even the people that were disgusted by it told 5 people about it, right? So, you know, and at the end of the day, they're buying the house. But, you know, would I recommend marketing like that? Probably not. But, you know, it worked for him. But it's his brand, you know, this shock jock of real estate, you know. But, you know, but generally, I like to recommend like traditional SEO and internet marketing.
Well, let's get back to your DJ business. So when did you start putting naked pictures of yourself out there on your
I know I should have done it. I think it might have been illegal at that time, but, you know, nevertheless, I would have really got the neighbors talking. But, you know, for me, it was interesting, right? I got the entrepreneurship life lessons basically compressed into like a year. You know, the guy that I went into business with ended up, you know, bailing like 6 months in. Like, it wasn't fun for him, and he left me with everything, and he just kind of wandered off and you know, moved away. And so I was doing this by myself, but I took this into college. Like, I ended up hiring contractors, interviewing employees to go and, you know, buying other sets of equipment, doing multiple gigs at a night. So I got this really young kind of like, you know, tiny experience of entrepreneurship. And I found a lot about me, like where my weaknesses are, where my strengths are, what I enjoy, what I don't. But, you know, for me, it's always been sales driven. You know, it's always been, you know, I think anybody for the most part can put a product together, varying degrees of success, but, you know, you can't do anything unless you sell it or get revenue for it. Otherwise, you know, we call that a hobby. It's not a business. So there's a lot of hobbyists out there in the entrepreneurship, right? Where they're, you know, they want the title, they want the recognition, but they're, you know, they really haven't scratched the surface on what they can do, because they're scared to get out there and push it forward, sell it.
So you're building your business, the DJ thing, you're going to college, you're pushing yourself through college. Did you think after you graduated from college that you were going to make this your career, the DJ business, or what happened after college?
No. So I always take the longest road, not because I'm smart or anything, but it's just because I'm stubborn, right? So I ended up getting put on academic probation because I was working, you know, I couldn't just do the college thing. So actually I went to school to become a paramedic. So I was working while I was going through my bachelor's degree overnight, you know, 40 hours a week, doing the whole EMS thing, right? And also doing the DJ thing. And I was working so much that I just wouldn't even show up for class because I was tired or whatnot. Right. And I ended up getting kicked out of college for a short period of time. And my parents, I was living with them at the time, kicked me out of the house. They were like, basically like, you're going to go to college or you're going to, you're going to lose you're going to lose everything. Right. We still love you, but you got to go out. If you're going to get out of this, you got to go make your own way. So that's what I ended up doing. I ended up, going to a series of odd jobs and that. And, I ended up kind of into entrepreneurship. I ended up coming back around and getting my degree or working towards it. But I got an opportunity to work in sales at an internet company, basically. And I got to experience all the different parts of like developing a tech company, right? The product, the marketing, the sales aspect. And then one of my coworkers at that company had a little side hustle. A little side hustle was like a landing page for basically trying to generate leads for people looking for nursing jobs, right? And he had a lot of trouble with it. He couldn't make any money off of it. He had the general concept, but I saw the mechanics. I saw the flaws in how the product was put together and how the revenue side was put together. And it was kind of built on the trust signal where like, I'll send you leads of nurses looking to get, for a job. And if you place one, send me $1,000. Well, wouldn't you know, nobody placed one, the first thing I said was, man, that's got to go. There's got to be some level of a subscription service or something. So we formed a partnership, and we went in and I basically redid this thing from scratch with him. And all of a sudden I said, these guys that are getting these leads of nurses that aren't placing one in 3 years, we've got to cancel their agreement because we got to take those leads to someone else who's going to pay us. Well, wouldn't you know, the day that we canceled that agreement, it's the day they came running back and said, "Oh, we're sorry, forgot to tell you, we placed 18 nurses last month. Here's $18,000." It's that, so you gotta, so we ended up keeping them and bringing on, and now that company has evolved into one of the companies I own now, which is called TrackFive. It's a $7 million company. So, we were able to kind of take that idea from that and move it forward into what the company is today.
And I got two questions on it. So,
yeah.
Do you think then that those people were in essence stealing from the company until they actually knew that they were going to stop losing their leads, or what do you think happened there? Because that's
they were placing the leads. They were utilizing the lead. They were just taking advantage of some, it was all based on the honor system. And one thing you gotta, I learned pretty early is that not all companies are 100% honest as you'd like them to be, right? So once we added kind of that pricing model where they pay regardless, and went to go shut them off, they quickly, came forth with the honesty, but it was their best lead source, and they didn't want to stop it. So, but anyway, we ended up expanding that to hundreds of clients across the country. And now we've used a similar model under one of my companies called TrackFive, which basically what TrackFive is we have a series of job boards and career sites in different niche verticals. So nursing, trucking, pilots, allied providers, doctors, you name it. And we not only develop the software, develop the marketing plan, and we sell it as a subscription service to people looking to hire. And it's a massive business. We have 26 people that work here. And then on top of that, we also have an agency division called Trusted Search Marketing, which is where we help clients do exactly what we do on a daily basis. So if, for example, there's clients that will come on to use our job boards, pay a subscription fee to use our job boards. And for whatever reason, it doesn't do well for them, or they have some special needs where really they need to do their own marketing rather than pay for a job board. So that's where Trusted Search Marketing comes in. We'll help them, use digital marketing to recruit just the same way we're doing it in this, in this company. But then we can also use digital for pretty much anything.
To go back a little bit to your college years, you talked about if you got kicked out of college or told to leave college, and then you worked and then went back. How long of a time in between leaving to going back?
I'd say about 2 years. I had a series of odd jobs, everything from like working at a CVS to a Turkey Hill, which is like a gas station, to I went back to EMS. I was working as a paramedic here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It was just, it's one of those things where I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I grew up watching my dad work, 60 hours a week and running these companies successfully, and some not successfully. But I guess, it took such a toll out of the family, so to speak, that I basically swore to myself that I would never be that guy behind a desk. You know what I mean? Never. I just swore it off. But then look at me now. It's on the same thing. So it's just weird how, when you're a kid, you can fight what you're supposed to be, but at some point it comes to you.
What was your mindset then once you went back to college the second time? Because I mean, there's an idea that if you go straight from high school to college, I think you only remember around 20% of what you learn. And I think that number goes to drastic. I don't know the percentage, but it goes to drastic if you actually work and then go back to college. I mean, what was that mindset like for yourself?
Yeah, so it was weird, right? So I was at a point where I started to go back to college, and my thought process was, all right, hey Dad, going back to college, here's the bill. And what I didn't realize that he wasn't going to pay for it anymore. He's like, look, we've spent a lot of money and you failed out of school, so that gravy train is gone. If you really want to go back, you're going to have to work for it. So that was kind of why I went to the pharmacy, and basically any job I could do, but check tuition reimbursement, right? Because I couldn't afford to pay for it. So I chugged along at 1 or 2 courses, a semester, very slow burning. Once I started my own company, within a year, I basically ended up being able to create income so I could finish college. But I started my own company. I didn't finish my bachelor's degree until 3 years into my first company. And, I ended up getting an MBA and working through that process. At that point, I kind of found myself a little bit, and I've learned how to do schoolwork. Like, I have terrible ADD, so I just couldn't do it. So, but it was weird. I got myself back on track, focused down, and ended up doing really well in the rest of my grad school and my MBA. But I was focused. I had at that point, I had 2 companies. I had the TrackFive company that I just referenced, but I also owned another marketing agency called Web Talent, which is a big agency here in the East Coast, which I sold about 5 years ago. And it's weird, right? So like by the time I graduated college, I had 2 7-figure, technology or marketing companies under my belt, and I was 23 years old. So it didn't help me as much, but it made me feel good that I finished it. And I do think that it gives you a decent foundation, and I think everyone should do it. In the tech industry, there's the Elon Musks and everybody else saying that, don't go to college, take a bunch of micro classes or micro degrees. They're called, get experience and go. But I don't know. I think there is something to be said about going through that rite of passage of going to college, sticking to something for 4 years, going through and getting a foundational outlay. I think it's important.
Were you allowing yourself to learn in college, or were you leaning on the stuff you picked up in your company? Because you've built these companies, you're learning on the job. And I'm assuming professors were giving you information, and sometimes what they were saying didn't really line up to what you learned on the front line. How was that?
So I was the only entrepreneur in my classes throughout the whole thing, right? So every once in a while, the professor would say, Oliver, what do you think? How do you handle that in your company? And I get to respond with like a real life example. And I remember there's 2 instances that were really interesting. One was an ethics class, a business ethics class. And I had just gone through the year before, basically buying out a partner who, for lack of a better word, didn't steal, but misappropriated funds, lied to the rest of the company. And it became a legal thing, if you will, to get him out. And, so I ended up telling this story about this 8-month trials and tribulations of working through getting sued or countersuing and all this stuff when you're 20, 3 years old with no money, and we're going through this whole thing. It's like, I'm giving this presentation because you had to either research or come up with something on your own. So I basically laid out what happened to me. And I remember it was crickets at the end of it. They couldn't believe this thing happened. And one of the kids raises their hands and said, so where is this guy, in jail? I'm like, no, we just paid him like $500,000. And they couldn't believe it. And because where's the happy ending? And sometimes the happy ending was we got to keep the company and move forward and turn it into a multi-million-dollar company years later, right? That's the happy ending. But initially, sometimes you got to pick and choose. You got to be strategic. You got to have patience, right? And I remember that that was a big one. And then the other one I learned was in my grad school. It was an internet marketing class, right? So 9 times out of 10, the teacher would be like, oh, SEO, this is what the book says, but Oliver, can you teach this more? Because the book doesn't really go into depth. Like, how does it really work? So I would sit up there, and there was times where the professor would say, I can't be here next Thursday. Oliver's going to lead the class on internet marketing, right? So I was like, I'm going to get a shoe in, right? So I don't have to do any work. So the final project was to do like a digital marketing plan. And I'm like, oh man, I got this, right? Link building, we're going to do personas. Like I was pulling everything out of my tactic belt where I was just like, I'm going to show this guy stuff that he didn't even know or think about. Like I'm going to just, blow the roof off this thing. And I got a C. And I went back to him at the end of class and I'm like, I'm really disappointed. Like I came to you with my very best work. Like I'm using tactics that, just came out last week that Google doesn't even know about. Like this is like cutting edge stuff. And he's like, you're right. It is tactic driven, but you failed to deliver any kind of comprehensive strategy. You're just tactic heavy. And I thought about it. I'm like, crap. I was so focused on impressing him with tactics that I forgot about the strategy that guides them. And one of the biggest lessons I've ever learned. So when we say like college, right? Like I could teach the class. I have more, tactical knowledge than any other one, but I failed to miss one of the basic principles. And that's where I think college can be helpful.
Oh, no, definitely. It makes sense. So you're building the companies, you're growing the companies. When did you actually start like looking at the idea of, I guess, giving back? Because you started getting a podcast, kind of telling a story. I mean, when did that come about?
What was the question again?
When did you start kind of like, you started growing the companies, right? You're building multiple companies, but now you're actually out there kind of getting more eyes on you, going on podcasts, getting more information. When did you kind of start, I guess, changing it, veering it a little bit of kind of telling more of your story, telling more about your company?
Yeah. So, for me, we kind of get back a couple of different ways. So for me, like I didn't have a mentor, right? Necessarily. I wish I did, I didn't know where, and it was the biggest mistake I think I made. And I would recommend to your viewers as well, if you have the opportunity to get a really good mentor very early on, it can be life-changing. I mean, it really can, especially I'm assuming in the real estate industry. Like there's probably some veteran guys out there that would love to take you under their wing, save you, tons of money and time and mistakes, and I think it's really helpful. So I try to do that now, right? So like I'm on a sabbatical, but I teach entrepreneurship at the local college. I've taught, for high school. I get involved in different volunteer things for coaching, underprivileged people that are looking to start their businesses. Knowledge is power, right? And if I can offer something like that, I'd rather do that than write a check if they don't know how to spend it, But we do a lot of thought content leadership, like podcasts like this, a lot of videos. We're speaking this week at a trade show on internet marketing, someone else from my team. Like, we definitely believe in contributing to a sense of community, and a lot of SEOs or a lot of internet marketers, they will approach this from, well, I've got the secret sauce. You can't, everything I do is proprietary and you don't, and that's just not true, right? There's different ways to do it, but there is no secret sauce in anything, So we believe that there's more advantage to having everybody come together and communicate and share than there is being that guy in the corner who's holding what he thinks are, the only marbles in town, right? So it's the right thing to do.
Was that always the mindset?
Yeah. Even, I had partners in the agency business that were like, oh, why are you giving this away? Why do you say this? Why are you telling this client this? Like we use this tool, and they could go get that tool. I'm like, look, if getting that tool, would negate the need for us, and then we don't have a very strong product, A, and B, if it's something they need to be successful, why would I hold that back in case of just making myself feel better? Or, we want to do right by our clients. That's the guiding principle, right? So honesty is part of that guiding principle. But like I said, if there's a piece of information or a tool that they can use or a strategy that we're holding back just because we're scared they're going to leave us, then we must not be very good at what we do,
Where do you think that mindset came from? Because that's very it usually takes people a lot of years to kind of understand that it's okay to kind of give free information, free knowledge, because they'll come back to you. You got to have a value proposition, so on and so forth. I mean, was that something that your dad kind of brought to you, or where did that come from? Do you remember?
I don't know if it necessarily was my dad, but it was more of this realization that there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? Usually one thing or one issue or one thing is usually it's not a monolithic thing, right? Like this one issue, right? So if we if we use a piece of software that's commonly available to everybody, and I feel like this client would benefit from it in this example, and they have a large team and they could benefit from it, me telling them to use that, like that piece of software is not why they use us, right? They use us for other things. And to understand that they would get value from that and the benefit that they have from that software, and for me being transparent and telling them about it, that trust that I'm going to get from that client is going to keep them on with me for years and years and years and years, right? And the risk of them saying, well, thanks for that tip on how to use Google Analytics, I'm going to leave you now. It's very, very, very rare. So it's that risk reward tolerance. And I think circling back to what I said in the beginning about knowing people, and also being a really good judge of like risk tolerance and things like that, you know, that's kind of where that came from. And I have the golden rule, right? Do unto others, right? You know, if there's a tool that can make my life easier and my agency's using it and they don't want to tell me what it is, conversely, I would feel kind of bad about that agency. I don't know if I trust them. I'd feel taken advantage of. I kind of would expect them to be honest with me, you know, so that's kind of my guiding principle there.
Makes sense. I mean, golden rule. I mean, that's as simple as it gets right there. What do you think has been one of your more difficult things of building your brand, building your company over the years?
So I think, you know, we talked about knowing people, right? So that's really important, but more important and much harder than that, this gets deep, is knowing yourself, right? So, and I'm not talking about professionally, like limitations, things you're good at, but also knowing how you treat people, how you talk to people, how you're perceived, what your leadership style is like. You know, so that's something, you know, 10 years, 12 years into as an entrepreneur, that's something that I'm really now just feeling confident enough to address in a very like vulnerable and true way with my team here. We just hired a company to do a retrospective, you know, and this person interviews everybody in the company through a very methodical type of interview, and puts together basically this anonymous type of, this is where you are in the industry. This is where your team thinks of you, your leadership, the company, the direction, the vision. And, you know, it's delivered completely anonymously. And, you know, I went through it and it was the most uncomfortable thing I've ever been through in my life. It was like, here are all the things you're doing great. And I like that part, you know, here are the things that you're doing okay. And then they're just eviscerated on a couple of things, right? Some of it didn't make sense and it wasn't accurate. Like, you know, I heard Oliver wants to sell the company. Well, that's not true. I don't know where it came from, but somebody in that list feels that way. So I've got to address that, right? So there's a level of vulnerability and a level of, not like, put it this way, not everybody can take criticism. And I think you have to be at that level, right? Like, cause this is, when you're an entrepreneur, it's your baby. I love this thing just like I love my kids, right? I put more time and effort into it. Like it's something I've grown since I was 23 years old. Like to have somebody come in and say, who works for you, that you pay for, I don't like it. I think it's a bad place to work or whatnot, it hurts. So, but to be able to not be defensive, to be able to not assign blame to that supposed person, but to really take the root cause and address it, that takes a level of maturity and emotional maturity that I think you get with confidence and time. So I am now 12 years in, just at that time where I can start to process that information and really make changes. And what's really cool is they've done subsequent kind of tests, and they've seen improvement from me and the company and our leadership team. So, but if 5 years ago, Oliver would not have been able to handle that. 5 years ago, Oliver would have just delete, because I was, in growth, right? Like, I'm like, oh, what do these people know? Screw them, But when you're trying to build a team and you're trying to exhibit trust and to, so like 5 years ago, I was building something that I could lead, right? Now I'm trying to build something that I can't lead, right? I'm trying to build something so that it doesn't rely around me, because we've reached a certain size that I become a bottleneck. So my objective now to 5 years ago is completely different. I want this thing to be able to run autonomously, and that's my metric for success.
So where are you going to be? And I guess in return, where your company going to be in 5 years from now?
So like I said, we just kind of have been really working on leadership. So we made some big leadership changes with the company that I run here. We've added another line of VPs that we didn't have before. We've gone through a lot of vision, long-term strategic planning and vision planning. So right now, and those things don't revolve around necessarily me, where they're bringing the ideas, or I'm trying to create this where they're kind of moving the company forward and I'm supporting them as opposed to dragging them through, right? And leading them by example and making sure that vision is clear. So next 5 years, I'm hoping that I'm able to kind of step back from the leadership of the company and the day to day and just kind of be that strategic leadership, but not necessarily leading people through tasks and things that have to be done. And then I know that I've succeeded at that point.
What are you going to do with more free time?
Well, to me, I'll probably always find something to do either within the company. I'll take on a project and run it, or or just get involved in other things. Like, entrepreneurs aren't entrepreneurs of one single business; they're just people that like to create. So, I'd love to do some other things. Ironically, real estate, right? That's something where I really like, and I've gotten into it at a little level, and it's interesting, right? It's a different part of the brain. It's a different side of business, especially nowadays. It's very, very confusing, very, very complicated with the home prices and the different markets. And, when you get into like rentals, like Airbnb versus regular rentals and COVID and all that kind of stuff, it's a moving target, and I find it really fascinating. So I've been kind of slowly getting into like the rental markets, for like Airbnbs and stuff, and just trying to flip properties. But it's been really difficult the last year and a half to find something that's not overvalued, So.
Well, it was funny. I had someone on the other day, because I'm always learning stuff on the podcast, talking to great people. And I had someone on. He buys land, and he holds a note on land for people, and then he's based like the bank on it. So it's a really low barrier of entry. I was like, that's a very interesting way of doing it, because people want land, they develop it. I mean, so anyways, well, let's say if you could talk back to your younger self, that person that just got kicked out of college, what advice would you give that kid?
I would say get back in college would be number one. But no, I mean, the thing is that I don't know if I would have followed the mold, right? If I would have followed the predestined plan for me, if I would be where I'm at today, right? So I feel like I'm one of those guys where, people say I don't regret a thing. Well, yeah, there's plenty of things I regret, but taking the way that I did and building it myself, and being able to build confidence in what I was doing by making mistakes, that really, I think that shaped who I was. I mean, when I was in high school, I went to a private school, and we had career assessments at the end of senior year, where basically you would take this 2-hour test. It would tell you what you were supposed to be. So as I mentioned earlier, I have terrible ADHD, right? So I did really poor at standardized tests, and everybody around me was getting doctor, lawyer, attorney. I looked at mine, and it said sanitation worker. Right? So imagine like 17-year-old kid, everyone around you like, hey, I'm going to be a scientist, I'm going to be a doctor, and mine says sanitation worker. I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a doctor too. But I remember it. And that was one of the most profound moments, because it was like, you're looking at your whole life, right? And you're looking at, wow, I'm not destined for, not hard, nothing to knock on sanitation workers, but, I don't think it's anyone's like life ambition probably at that age. You have really big ambitions for yourself. And, it was killer for me. And that was when I realized that, I didn't fail school. School failed me, right? School is kind of for a set kind of criteria, and I'm not knocking it. It's valuable, but you have to learn when you're a little different, like I am, or, you have a learning disability, or you're entrepreneurial or creative in nature. School isn't really built for those type of people. It's meant for people who can kind of color in the lines. And, I just had to learn to kind of stick with it. So what would I have done differently? I would have told myself to hang on, go through your experiences, keep pushing, keep learning, and find this out in a way that makes sense for you. But yeah, there's a lot of people, entrepreneurs, that do really poorly in school, that make really successful businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, it's if you're in school right now trying to find out what's the best avenue for you, I mean, give it a chance. Mentors, I mean, I've heard a lot of people talk about that. Try to find people that have been in the avenues that you want to be in. They'll give you feedback, give you advice. I mean, there's so many people out there, especially, people like yourself, Oliver, that have succeeded or are on the path to success. They're willing to give back. For the most part, people that aren't willing to talk to you or take your call, they might be hiding something, or they really haven't succeeded on the level that you're looking to get to. So I think there's so many opportunities, there's so many avenues. School is not the one path, I think, for everyone. I think it could be a great avenue.
Yeah. Well, a good example, right? Like I've gotten countless emails just in LinkedIn requests randomly from people that are like, hey, something happened to me, or I'm really struggling with this thing. I'm trying to become an entrepreneur. Do you have 5 minutes to talk to me? And I'll generally always respond and be like, yeah, let's have a quick conversation. Or people have asked me to come to coffee and things like that. And, I guess I never, like I said, I never had that. So I feel kind of obligated to try and to pay it forward. But, there are also formal things like SCORE. SCORE has a really good program. I had a mentor through SCORE for a little bit here at the end of about 4 or 5 years ago. And it really helped me soften me up to be able to receive criticism before we went to this, when I went full throttle. But, if any of you are looking for any kind of mentorship, SCORE in your local area, it's free. And they're generally, it's all retired executives. They have a wealth of knowledge. And I don't know, there's probably some real estate ones in there too, so probably a little bit of everybody.
Well, thank you all for being here. What's the best way people are looking to follow your journey or reach out to you? What's the best avenues?
Yeah, so you can check us out at trustedsearchmarketing.com, Trusted Search Marketing, or you can just hit me up on LinkedIn at Oliver Feakins, and we can go from there.
Appreciate it. Thank you again, Oliver, for being on the podcast. Thank you, everyone listening. Hopefully, you got some great nuggets right there. Please subscribe. Please share. Go find Oliver. All his information is in the show notes. Thanks again, Oliver.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, guys.